Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Planning and Development Control Committee meeting. My name is Omid Miri. I'm chair of the committee. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Just going to run through some housekeeping points before we get to the main items on the agenda. The meeting is being live streamed, so by participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting calmly by the nearest exit, which is through the doors on the right and out the main entrance. And officers will direct you to the assembly point, which is on Blacks Road. The meeting will be taken as adjourned until it can safely resume business. And toilets can be found through the door at the back of the room on my right. No worries. And can officers please introduce themselves when they start speaking? Moving on to item 1, apologies for absence, and we do have apologies from councillors Carmel and councillor Walsh. That can be noted. Moving on to item 2, declaration of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? Okay, no declarations of interest. And item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of January 2025. Are the minutes agreed? Agreed. Okay, if they can be noted as agreed. Now I'm going to slightly reorder the agenda. I'm going to bring items 7, 8, 9, and 10, the Fitzgeorge Avenue items, to the front, and then we'll move on to item 4. So in that case, I would like, is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. In that case, can I ask Neil to please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This presentation relates to the 4 applications for Fitzgeorge Avenue for the sites known as flats 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's one presentation for them all. Sorry, move it back. Yeah, just shows the wider Fitzgeorge estate in red, where the application is going to be, where the application proposed. It's a mansion block on the south side of Fitzgeorge Avenue, and okay, it the next. Give them back on that. Yep, show the wider context. The wider Fitzgeorge estate is shown in the large red circle. The proposals would be largely contained within the rectangle inside. The site is within the Fitzgeorge and Fitzjames conservation area, and then the Dorcas estate conservation area and the Gunter estate conservation area is nearby. The site is in flood risk zone 2. And a bit of background. The slide show. Sorry. This slide shows previously consented basement proposals on the estate. Sites A, B, and C were approved in 2019 at committee. Sites D, E, and F were allowed on appeal in 2018. And then on the opposite side, you have sites G, H, and I, which were approved. The larger site in 2017 for 3 flats, and the other 2 sites for flats. Just as a brief summary of that history. Now, the current applications follow on from 4 applications that were refused last year, looking to, I suppose, get permission again for these flats. Now, there was concerns raised by the officers at the time with regards to the quality of the proposed accommodation, highways matters, as well as flood risk concerns, and that went to appeal. And the planning inspector dismissed all the appeals last year on those grounds: the highways grounds, the flooding grounds, and the quality of the accommodation. I would just flag up initially in the addendum that include the paragraph 2.3 for all of the reports. incorrectly stated that the inspector only dismissed the appeal on one ground, the quality of the accommodation, so that the paragraph had been reworded just to make sure it's clear that the appeal was dismissed on flood risk, lack of measures to secure car parking permit-free development, and the living conditions of the future occupiers. There's also further paragraphs then within the addendum just to clarify further on the assessments made later. The four applications have all generated between 63 and 66 objections each, which are all summarised within the officer's report. With regards to the reasons for the appeal being dismissed, the substandard quality of accommodation in terms of outlook and limited access to daylight, an updated daylight and sunlight report has been submitted, and it demonstrates that the flats would receive satisfactory daylight and sunlight, and officers consider on balance the outlook itself would also be acceptable for this type of basement development. Concern was raised, the concerns also raised by residents on that accommodation. They also raised concerns about the proposed amenity spaces would result in noise disturbance and nuisance for residents living in the flats above. Officers consider that the scale of development, the noise and disturbance from the amenity spaces would not result in demonstrable harm to existing residents. And it's noted of the previous appeal that were dismissed, the planning inspector did not consider that these areas would result in any harm to the existing residents. There was concerns raised about the loss of the car parking spaces on the site. However, officers consider, given the scale of the proposed light wells and their location, it is not considered that it would demonstrably harm the existing car parking spaces' usability. And then with regards to the lack of information on flood risk, an updated flood risk assessment was provided, which confirms that the statutory tests have been carried out, and measures about how the basement will be flood-proofed have been provided, including non-return valves. Then this sort of the reasons refused on the previous application say poor quality accommodation, outlook and sunlight. They say upheld by the inspector, the current application addressed these concerns. Updated daylight and sunlight report and the outlook afforded to the flats is similar to that afforded to previous flats that have been granted within the estate. And I'd say the daylight and sunlight indicates that the levels provided would meet the BRE guidance criteria. Therefore, on balance, we consider the proposal would result in an acceptable standard of accommodation. Flood risk concerns, as say, they provide an addendum with details of the waterproofing methods, active drainage devices, and non-return valves. And on highways, the current applications all include a draft unilateral undertaking, legal agreement to secure car-free development. There's some photographs now of this site. It's sort of a wider view of the rear area. Sorry, I'm trying to move the cursor. The flats are all on the southern side of the development at these basement levels. It's a bit difficult from the view with a large tree there to show clearly, but now in terms of the flat 5, the light well would be to the side of this block as well as to the front. And again, this is flat 5, so this light well would be widened a little bit to allow light in. So the windows here would be south facing. Again, here we have the existing stairwell and fire escape to this block. The light well would be below at basement level, below the fire escape. You can see shortly when I show the plans. And again, it just indicates, looking down the rear area, that there will be a small light well to the south of the block, just allowing light to the windows. Again. So the space would be underneath here, underneath this area. So it'll still get light from the south. We won't have any impact on the existing fire escapes. Sorry. Proposed plans, right. So the first flat would be on the eastern end of the block, at ground floor level. What you see, this is the existing building here. You've got stairs down, up and down to the Lightwell area. And then this is the flat. So you will have windows here to the south in that Lightwell. You will have windows then looking to the east and to the west, which do look out onto high walls. However, it is considered with the levels of light that are provided, the quality of the accommodation is considered to be satisfactory. There are just some elevation. You can see the windows, the basement level into the Lightwell, and on the side. Flat 2 is next to that. And again, you can see the flat amenity area to the east and west again. And, you know, the flat sizes are satisfactory. And so the lighting report demonstrates that each of the flats will receive enough natural daylight and sunlight to meet the BRE guidelines. Again, the windows here at basement level. Flat 4, which is further to the west, is here. It is again has the amenity area to the east, and then there's a shared access there to the west, and then the light wells to the front to allow light in. And then the final flat 5 is here on the western edge. It's sort of a larger 2-bedroom flat, and internal amenity space there, and external sort of terrace area there. So on balance, officers consider that with the new updated daylight and sunlight report, which is considered to be robust, demonstrates that the flats would achieve satisfactory levels of daylight and sunlight. The outlook is limited, but that is not unusual for basement developments of this type, and with the reasonable levels of lighting received, officers consider on balance that the quality of the accommodation would be acceptable, which is similar to the views that have been taken in the past with previous approvals. The unilateral undertaking will ensure that the flats are not eligible for parking permits on street. The site is highly accessible, close to local facilities, and has a very high public transport accessibility level. And the updated flood risk information demonstrates that it is acceptable. The Environment Agency have raised no objections to the proposal. Our own specialist officers dealing with flooding are comfortable with it. Notwithstanding that, we have attached a condition to the permission to the applications, if they're approved, where we will seek an updated flood risk assessment with additional SUDS measures that can be achieved once the scheme is further developed. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify that there was one report, but we'll vote on items 7, 8, 9, and 10 separately. And before we move on to the speakers, Matt, if you wouldn't mind just explaining for the benefit of everyone here what the function of the addendum is, and specifically with regards to items 7, 8, 9, and 10, what is in the addendum.
Thank you. Through the chair. I'm Matt Butler. I'm Assistant Director of Development Management at the Council. Yeah, so the addendum, generally speaking, is there to correct any minor errors, add any additional information that may have arisen post publication of the agenda, for example, any more representations we might have received, and also an opportunity to clarify any matters. In particular reference to the Fitzgeorge applications, we did discuss this with our legal officers, and we're certainly satisfied that the correct and appropriate procedures have been followed in respect of the use and the publication of the agenda this evening. The addendum is sought to, as I said, to correct minor errors and clarify matters. In the case of the Fitzgeorge applications, it's in relation to previous appeal decisions for similar proposals for each of the flats. And it was namely to correct reference to these appeal decisions, which are a material consideration in the assessment of the applications. However, it makes no material difference to our assessment of the proposals and how we have presented these assessments of, or presented these assessments for committee's consideration and decision this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we do have two speakers. We have Mr. Wallace and Mr. Leinenthal. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You have 5 minutes between you for each application, so you have 20 minutes total speaking time. You can split that between you however you'd like. And we did have the agent registered to speak in favour, but unfortunately, due to last-minute circumstances, they could not make it. So, Mr. Wallace and Mr. Leinenthal, if you'd like to come to the front here. And will just one of you be speaking? Yeah? Okay, come ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. When you're ready, just press the button on the right-hand side. It will go green. And then, as I say, you have 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Yep, that sounds right. Thank you very much. My name is Richard Linenthal. I live on Fitzgeorge Avenue, and I've been a resident on the avenue for the past 30 years. My comments this evening concern 4 proposed basement flat developments, which are items 7 through 10 on the agenda. The issues which concern us are essentially the same for each of the 4 planning applications. Therefore, I am intentionally consolidating my comments. I'm representing another resident who also registered to speak, Mr. Wallace, and we will not need to use the full 20 minutes which is allocated to us. I hope this will come as some relief. I will respond to the addendum at the end of my prepared statement. I speak on behalf of more than 60 local residents who have registered formal objections to each of the 4 applications. The strength of this opposition is due not only to what we believe would result in seriously substandard living spaces. These 4 flats would be entirely subterranean spaces, but also to the fact that this saga of repeated applications and appeals for these basement flats has been going on for 7+ years, resulting in 24 separate applications. What concerns us now is that we believe there are material errors of fact in the 4 case officers' reports, the ones included in today's papers. We believe that the 4 appeal decisions prepared by Planning Inspector Chris Baxter following a personal inspection of the site are very inaccurately reported. And the recommendations now to approve the planning applications are seriously flawed. We note in the current applications that the case officer emphasizes, and I quote, "The inspector's decision carries significant weight in the determination of this application," end of quote. That is paragraph 2.3. If so, this necessitates accuracy and clarity. In brief, the case officer concludes, and I quote again, "The inspector's only ground for dismissing the appeal was insufficient evidence to demonstrate the proposal would receive sufficient levels of daylight and sunlight." But to our understanding, this is simply not true. In his appeal decision, the inspector, Chris Baxter, states clearly that he believes the appeal should be dismissed on the grounds of inadequate daylight and sunlight, as well as the unacceptable risk of flooding and also the harmful effect on highway safety. Following Inspector Baxter's decision, there were daylight and sunlight reports commissioned by the applicant, one for each application, concluding that they believed the natural light provision was in fact sufficient. On the strength of this, the case officer has now recommended to you that planning permission be granted. There is no mention that the inspector also objected on the grounds of flood risk and highway safety, and these issues do not appear to have been resolved in the planning applications. I will address the addendum in just a moment. This is incorrect and misleading. I imagine it is a careless oversight, but it is a very serious one. We are also concerned that the sunlight and daylight reports have not received the careful scrutiny they require. They were commissioned by the developer, stroke applicant, and they appear to be based only on computer modeling. As far as one can infer from the reports themselves, the consultant who produced them did not visit the site in person. This is in contrast to the planning inspector who did make a visit to inspect the properties. Case law precedent requires that local planning authorities rigorously scrutinize such reports to ensure that they are accurate, complete, and follow the necessary guidelines. Failure to do so in other cases has resulted in the overturning of planning decisions when challenged in judicial review. We, the residents, have asked if Hammersmith and Fulham Council has commissioned independent light reports. We have not received an answer, and we imagine that the answer is there are no such independent reports. We have not been silent about our concerns. We have written formally in anticipation of tonight's meeting, explaining our belief that there are material errors of fact in the case officer's reports for the 4 planning applications. We strongly requested that these 4 applications be removed from tonight's agenda, a postponement, to allow the paperwork to be properly reviewed and to allow you, the members of this committee, the chance to consider them correctly and responsibly and accurately reported. Unfortunately, this request was denied. You will understand that we, the residents, do not have the right to appeal the grant of planning permission. However, we can challenge the lawfulness of the decision-making process. It is essential that you, the committee, are given the chance to consider the cases with the certainty that your decisions are based on full and accurate understanding. The documents now before us do not make this possible. There is no requirement that you as a committee reach a decision today. You are entitled to refer these 4 applications back to the case officer for further review and reconsideration. We, the residents of Fitzgeorge and Fitzjames Avenue, strongly believe that this is the only responsible next step. Allow me now to make a few comments about the addendum, which, as we all know, has only just been received. It contains material amendments which need careful thought and scrutiny by all concerned. It is far more than the correction of minor errors or matters to clarify that I was told to expect when I raised the question yesterday. In attempting to summarize the appeal decisions, the addendum misrepresents the decision-making process of the appeals inspector. For example, and again, we've had such little time to look at this addendum. For example, with regard to the car-free development, the appeals inspector makes clear that he does not believe that a suitable mechanism could ever prevent a parking permit being obtained in the future. I do urge you to review the appeal decisions. With regard to flood risk, the appeal inspector did not merely state that an updated flood risk assessment would suffice. Once again, I strongly advise that you have the opportunity to review that appeal decision. Moreover, the addendum does not address at any point the reliance upon reports produced by a developer. These reports state that they are not to be relied upon by others except at their own risk without independent scrutiny. Once again, we, the residents of Fitzgeorge Avenue and Fitzjames Avenue, request that you refer these 4 applications back to the case officer for further review and consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat, thanks for your time. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of the speakers. Now we can move on to questions for officers. And would anyone like to start the question? Yeah, Councillor Trey.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking, and thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of questions from me. You said there were other basements that got permission in the areas right at the beginning of your report. Has there been a sort of comparison made between the light that other basements have received in those dwellings that got permission and these ones? Can we do a like for like in any way, or it just haven't, do we have that information available or not, do you think?
We wouldn't have that information available. I mean, the basements that were approved previously certainly are on the north side of the site, so would not benefit from direct sort of sunlight, etc., which these sites would. I imagine these sites would have a better quality of light. The other application would have been assessed under the guidelines at the time. The BRE guidelines have changed in about 2 years ago, changed how they measure the internal light received by flats. So I'm aware that, as far as I'm aware from the case of the units on the north side of Fitzjames have been implemented. I'm not sure they've been completed yet. I can't confirm that, but they have been implemented. But I think obviously each application has to be assessed on its merits, and officers, having reviewed the daylight and sunlight report, which has been carried out in line with the guidelines, are satisfied that the light those flats received does meet the standard.
Matt, did you want to come in?
Thank you.
Through the chair, the only point I was which Neil did reference at the end, just to emphasise the importance to the committee. It is important that each application is decided on its own individual merits. That's a key thread that runs through the planning process.
Thank you for that. I understand that. Thank you. And just about the parking. So the developers are entering into a unilateral agreement. So that is a binding legal agreement. And do we have other examples of that being used as a definite way of stopping parking permits in the borough?
Yes, that is a mechanism that has been used effectively within the borough. I mean, for some large developments, you may have a Section 106 agreement, which would include permit-free matters. For smaller schemes, small conversions. In the past, we have used conditions to try and control parking. However, we've had difficulties on appeal where these have been challenged. So therefore, the mechanism we've now adopted is to have a unilateral undertaking, to a legal agreement that's signed up between the developers and the council, and it gives us control to ensure that parking permits would not be issued to those flats.
Legal, would you like to come in? Yeah.
Hi, Chair. Hi, my name is Gerda. I'm a solicitor for planning, highways and licensing. We do now, there's a case, Court of Appeal, Kodari. Before, as Neil said, there was a condition included in the planning permission not allowing any parking permits to be applied for. That case, and the judge in that case decided it was not legally binding. All the developers, either small or big, need to enter into an agreement, either a unilateral undertaking or under Section 106 agreements. Unilateral undertaking for small schemes are entered from the developer to the council and they provide their binding obligations, they can't apply for parking permit. Even if they wanted to apply for parking permit, they can't have a parking permit. And in all the agreements, we say if, for example, the freeholder will have to give a leasehold interest to somebody else, there is a covenant in every leases, tenancies, to say that they can't apply for a parking permit. So it's legally binding and it can be enforced.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful clarification. Councillor Pascu-Tiburi.
Very much. I note that on, I think, flat 4, the double bedroom is 9.6 square meters, which falls below the 11 square meters minimum requirement for a double bedroom. And this is a bit of a worry for me because, you can have a really small bedroom or you can live underground, but to have both strikes me as creating a pretty depressing place to live. At what stage below minimum requirements does it have to be before it becomes unacceptable? And to what extent are we showing too much flexibility, perhaps?
Through the chair, we wouldn't have a particular threshold where we would determine it too small. It would have to be decided on its own individual merits and in the round against all the other merits or otherwise that were before us. So we would take into account a number of factors before we would make a decision on whether its size was too far below the minimum. So unfortunately, there is no figure we can give you. It would be a case of a rounded assessment, which we've done here and presented in the report.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. If I could follow up, what were the factors in this case?
Through the chair, as presented in the report, all the various aspects of what we felt was relevant in terms of providing acceptable accommodation. And they're all in the report there in terms of size, daylight, outlook, the need for accommodation in the borough, the previous appeal decisions, flood risks, parking, just all those material considerations in the report.
But it would be an entirely reasonable thing to, based on the material available, come to a different conclusion, that cumulatively the effects of this would be such that this doesn't have to be accepted.
Sorry, through the chair, yes, obviously that's committee's discretion to reach a different conclusion to the officers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Councillor Chevot-Verdier. So a mention was made of a concern that the light consultant had not visited the site, was using a computer model. Can you speak to that and just clarify that for us?
Yes, the assessments are generally done for developments like this using computer modelling, using the scale plans that the architects would provide, applications such as View City, which sort of map out other buildings in the context, are all used, and then that is then the calculations are done, based on the orientation of the units, where the light's coming from, etc. There's no, we've spoken to a lighting consultant that we use, and generally, for a scheme of this size and nature, there's not a requirement for them to visit the site. If they were having to assess the impact of a development on neighbouring windows, then it is recommended that a site visit would be carried out as well. But that wouldn't be the case here, because all they're assessing is the illuminance for the proposed units.
Okay, thank you. So just to reassure us, this isn't something out of the ordinary. It's standard practice for applications of this sort that a computer model is used.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chevot-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I wondered if we could go back on the slides to where it shows where exactly the flats are. Yeah, thank you. So where the small rectangle is, I can see on Google Earth, there is a gigantic tree right there. Would that be accounted for in the sunlight report?
Yes, it would.
So with that enormous tree that seems to be blocking all light, they still concluded that there would be a significant amount of sunlight.
They did. It did meet the guidelines. I mean, I'd say the south facing, the sun is sort of sweeping around east to west, so we'll be getting light throughout the day. The tree obviously will have an impact, but that would be something that has to be considered and assessed as part of the study.
That's good. And this committee wouldn't have to hear tree preservation order as a result of that. That's not within the red line, is it?
The tree is not within the red line of the site, no.
Thank you. And then another question was around, so we've talked at length about the car, I think the size of the rooms, the other elements of the rejection by the inspector I wanted to talk to you about. So thanks for clarifying in the addendum that it wasn't just for daylight and sunlight, it was also for flood risk, the car permit that my colleague talked about. I note that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the council rejected on the basis of ventilation, but the planning inspector did not uphold that. So are we now satisfied the ventilation is fine? And what has changed between the time that we recommended rejection and now?
I mean, the previous refusal, when we were saying what we would have determined the application on, we had concerns about air quality. That was something we did use in the appeal, in our statement on the appeal. But you are correct. The planning inspector, I mean, in the appeal decision, you know, he talked about the council had raised concerns with regard to the effects the proposal would have on air quality. Conditions were suggested to relate to air quality, including ventilation strategies. I mean, the inspector did not consider that was a ground for dismissing the appeal. I mean, he felt, you know, the other issues that had been raised were like the impact on the character and appearance of conservation area, living condition, compromising the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers, and he didn't feel that he would attribute very little weight, minimal weight to those matters, and would not outweigh the main harm he found, which was the flooding, highways, and the daylight sunlight. So
through their determination, a planning inspector have indicated to us where they would put the bulk of the weight, which is on the matters that you've clarified in the addendum, and all of these matters you consider to be resolved.
Yep, that is correct. I mean, there is I'd also flag up condition 8 on the report, which does relate that we still feel a ventilation strategy generally, because of the poor air quality in the area, would be necessary. So we're seeking for a ventilation strategy report, and then a follow-up then with the implementation, once that's been implemented, to demonstrate that it has been submitted satisfactorily. So the applicants have agreed to that pre-commencement condition.
Thank you. And there was also something we were defending, we were sort of recommending rejection around noise and nuisance. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern and objection that's been raised over the majority of the similar applications on the site. None of the appeal decisions, whether dismissing an appeal or allowing an appeal, have ever given significant weight to that concern. Has felt it's not a lot different than a flat being below you, having a window open, playing music, or having communal space at ground floor level with people out making use of that. So I don't feel there is any strong weight we could give to those concerns.
Thank you. So, and Goethe, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's therefore because in the planning inspection decision, they have focused on 4 main elements that we rejected the previous application for those reasons. The other elements that they didn't uphold, we can't actually attach any weight in our decision tonight.
I mean, certainly in terms of the appeal decision, the inspector put weight on those matters you outlined and did not give significant weight to the others. The inspector's decision is is something of significance has to be taken into account. Officers have, still reviewed those matters as part of their assessment of the current applications and are of the view that, noise and disturbance from use of the amenity space would not be such that would warrant withholding planning permission.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I just say from the legal point of view, I would say that the appeal decision was relating to previous applications. So at this point in time, we are assessing, and in our legal point of view is each application for Fitzgeorge Avenues have been assessed by the officers in the reports in its own merit, and we are satisfied that this has been clearly done.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? No further questions. Any further comments from officers? No? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to voting. So first we'll vote on item 7, voting on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that's on page 172. Councillor Chavot-Verdier, will you be voting for, against, or not voting?
For.
Okay. Councillor Melton? For. Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. Now we vote on whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed, and that's also on page 172. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton? For. Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. So that was for item 7. Now we vote on item 8. Firstly on recommendation 1, which is on page 195 of the report. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. And recommendation 2, which is also on page 195. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton? Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. That was item 8. Now we vote on item 9. Recommendation 1 is on page 218. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton? Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
Against.
I'll be voting for. And recommendation 2, which is also on page 218. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton? Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. So that was recommendation item 9, which has been approved. And now we move finally on to item 10, recommendation 1, which is on page 241. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton? Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
I'll also be voting for. And recommendation 2, which is also on page 241. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
For.
Councillor Melton? Councillor Trey?
For.
Councillor Souslus?
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tibure?
For.
And I'll also be voting for. So item 10 has also been approved. So items 7, 8, 9, and 10 have been approved. Thank you everyone for your time and for coming tonight. Now we move on to item 4, which is Olympia Way. And Yayan, I believe you're presenting the report. Whenever you're ready, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just while Alan's loading up the presentation. Thank you, Chair. Just an overcap of the Olympia master plan and adjoining land. Members will be aware this is an ongoing project of some scale. On the site location plan you're looking at there, the red area is the subject of the current application, and the area to the left of that, which is to the west, is the main Olympia estate that's currently being developed out. So between the two of them, one is obviously significantly greater in size than the other one, but between the two of them, that is the extended Olympia estate. And the reason that the red area is important, notwithstanding its size, is because within that and the works that are to be carried out there relate to the pedestrianisation of Olympia Way, which is a significant element in the aspirations to improve the public realm there and the public use of it, and gives access as well to via the staircase to the upper level of the podium, the open space on the main estate. So although one is significantly greater than the other, they're very much interrelated, and the quality of both is dependent. Okay, Alan. The backstory to this application is that the application for the main master plan and the application for Olympia Way went to the same committee. Originally, it was intended that they would move forward at roughly the same pace. The reason that one was in detail and full application reason, the other one was an outline, the Olympia Way was outlined, was simply to do with land ownership, and they had to acquire the land from the railway operator before they could actually go ahead. So it was a disconnect there. Both were approved. Both have a 106 attached to them, and the outline one, which was the Olympia Way one, was then subject of a reserve matter application, which was also approved. And those of you familiar with that process will know that the outline permission itself means you can't actually build at that point. You have to then submit the reserve matters to draw down the detail from the application. And so that was done. In short, the scheme before you this evening is an alternative version of what was previously approved. The key changes are that we'll see the images in a minute, but we've now got 12 pavilions instead of a sort of terrace of two-storey properties along the railway line boundary, which is a significant improvement. There's a digital screen that's positioned, again, we'll see the image in a minute, opposite the main staircase access to the upper open space and amenities on the Olympia main site. And that is intended to display information relating to the exhibitions and other wayfaring information, etc. So it faces the exhibition centre. And then the station building. The station building itself, it hasn't changed in any material way from the last one that was approved. It looks different now. The materiality is different, changing the colour, and that's to reflect the pavilions rather than the actual terrace of buildings. It was previously, again, we'll come on to it, but kind of greenish colour. Now it's more of a bronze. So that's the change. The other benefit from this, apart from the two changes, is the fact that the quality of the pedestrian realm, the public realm, and the landscaping on this scheme, from officers' perspective, is very much improved on what was approved previously as well. So that's a sort of rough picture of the context. It's essentially it's as previously approved, apart from these improvements that I just highlighted. Yeah, that's okay. That's a comparison. What you're looking at there, left is the southern end, which is Hammersmith Road, and right is the northern end, which is where McLeese car park site is, etc. So that's the orientation. The proposed scheme is the bottom one. The one above it is the one previously approved. So you can see that in terms of footprint, they are more or less exactly the same. And then you can also see on the top one, the two-storey buildings I mentioned that run along the railway boundary that were approved as part of the original scheme. You can see those in the top image between the sort of the more substantive building on the right-hand side and heading towards Hammersmith Road. On the proposed scheme, which is the current scheme, you'll see the difference there, that you can see the pavilions there instead of that continuous terrace of buildings. And about halfway through it, you can see the dark line of where the screen is that faces the steps. And that allows a degree more open space and public realm, and allows therefore more landscaping. There are some related changes as well to do with the nature of the fencing, etc. But again, we can come on to that as we move forward. So that's an overview of the changes, and the key elements here is that we've already approved these in a slightly different form, and we feel this is this is a progression. Right, that is an image from the previous one, and you'll see in a minute why I mentioned the different colouring. The building itself is substantially the same. The two-storey thing in the foreground there is one of the buildings that were previously approved, which are no longer proposed. So if you can recall that, then there's a green finish. That's the current arrangement. So that's what I meant by more of a bronze finish. And you can see instead of that green two-story building, it was in the foreground of the previous image. We've now got these more bespoke, I'm not sure what we're calling them actually, but structures anyway. 12 of those things, and that allows for more pockets sort of open space between them than would otherwise be allowed with the continuous terrace previously approved. Yeah, this relates to the actual replacement station building itself. There's no need really to dwell on this. This is a ground floor level. There's some commercial, and then there's some facilities that are being built for the station itself, including staff rooms and toilets. And then the 3 upper floors are basically offices, which is much the same, as I said, as we did previously. That's a longer view. You can see in the distance there the 4-story building we were just looking at. So that's a view from further up towards Hammersmith Road, and again gives the impression of the more open sort of public realm, as facilitated by the use of these pavilions rather than the continuous building form. Yeah, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. What you saw before is a version of that. For those of you who can read plans and who want to get involved with that, I mean, it's just really to give an idea of the materiality. This is a more interesting one. This shows you the screen I mentioned, which is facing and directly opposite the main staircase that leads from Olympia Way to the level 2, they're calling it, I think, on the main Olympia, which is an area of amenity space with shops and eateries, and also serves for access to the theatre and other elements too. So that's part of the kind of ambition to make the site more accessible, given that Olympia historically has been done ad hoc, so you can't actually get through the site. One of the main aspirations of the master plan was to be able to draw members of the public into the site. So, for example, the pedestrianisation of Olympia Way is part of that, and another part of that, an important part of that, is how you get off of Olympia Way up these stairs and then find yourself within the main Olympia master plan site, where you can obviously make use of the shops and the other facilities that are there, as well as gain access to other elements of the scheme, including the theatre and the music venue, etc. So, yeah, that's looking the opposite way to what we saw before. That's looking from the north to the south, and it's probably one of the better ones there. It does show you part of the landscape, and Alan will come on to the landscaping shortly, but as I said, the view amongst officers at least is that this is a significant improvement on what was put forward before. Yeah, that's an aerial view. What that shows you, if you like, is see the 2 pillars on the top of that image is where the stair access between the Olympia listed buildings is. The south end of it, the white, so you can see the pavilions and the I can't read the number from here, but it looks like 3. That's where the screen is that you're looking at in the last image. So that screen is backing onto the railway and facing the main staircase that provides access and egress from level 2 of Olympia, and is central to the site, and it is intended at least to sort of offer kind of facilities that allow people to find their way around the estate more easily than currently. So again, a positive thing from the officer's perspective. Yeah, that's just a breakdown of what the screen could be used for. So again, synergies with the exhibition centre function as well as the elements of the estate more generally.
Alan, did you want to come in at this point to talk a bit about the design? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. So just with this, I mean, on the pavilion structures, they are also designed to emulate some of the recent additions to the overall campus. So you'll note the kind of rooftop additions to the main kind of campus in terms of the materiality that's been sought to bring forward in terms of these new structures. And as Jane said, in terms of the replacement station building, this plan just shows an overview of the improvements from Hammersmith Road through to the station entrance, and really quite clearly what we're trying to do here and what the updated proposal brings forward, as Jane said, is kind of a more significant opportunity for improved public realm, not only in terms of vehicular and pedestrian cycle movements between the station and to the campus itself through to Hammersmith Road, but also in terms of a significant amount of additional greening and landscaping work. So I'm just going to go through that quickly. And as I said here, this is quite a significant increase in terms of biodiversity net gain from the current circumstance where there is a target of 10%. This is actually a 938% increase against the background condition. So just to talk through some of these spaces quite quickly. So these are just some visuals of the key spaces that the improvements to the scheme bring forward. So this is a space at the kind of the interface with Hammersmith Road. So it's kind of a bit of an urban oasis that's being created. So you can see a view again from both aspects of how you'd experience that, either coming into Olympia Way or going out into Hammersmith Road. Again, quite lush landscaping and species that have been agreed with our ecologists to bring forward that kind of greening of this, you know, what is quite an austere environment at the moment. As you again had said, the kind of entrance to Grand Hall and the screen to the south, again, there is quite a clear kind of pedestrian and wayfinding kind of sightline between these two elements, with again the pavilions kind of serving to provide a sense of enclosure to the street. And also you'll see these kind of these elements here, which we'll go into in a second, which actually provides a screen onto the railway line, again in matching specification to the main pavilion buildings themselves. Again, additional landscaping provided within planters up to ramped access to the Grand Hall, that we think is obviously quite an important improvement against the baseline condition. And then just finally, and again, the understanding of kind of the general condition of this in terms of what's referred to as kind of the crescent environment. But this again is showing that, you know, across the entirety of the campus that you're getting that improvement, and both in terms of space to dwell, landscaping, and additional trees as well in comparison to the extent consent. And then just finally, the detail of how the station access will be improved. So again, for visitors to Olympia, but also the more general environment, you know, this at the moment is quite a hostile environment, particularly with vehicles moving through the space. But again, you know, the downgrade of this to prioritise pedestrians, we feel is a real significant improvement from the extant permission. And sorry, just finally, this is just the detail of the kind of railings that present themselves to the railway line. So as Jan had said, in terms of the original outline consent and the detail that was submitted, the entirety of the kind of station frontage and edge to the railway lines was originally intended to be kind of enclosed by these two-storey buildings. So what we've got here is hopefully a bit more of a sensitive boundary treatment in terms of being in a similar composition, as I say, to the main building elements that tie it into the appearance and legibility of the campus overall, really. Yeah, and do you want to come back on this point?
Yeah, Ian, your mic. Thank you.
A CGI which gives you a feel, if you like, about the quality of the space. I mean, this is looking north. So the bottom end of it is where one of the hotels will be, and that's where Alan was showing you the improvements to the public realm and the highway matters there as well. But I think this one gives you a flavour. The other point I was going to make, and it's perhaps not clear from some of the drawings, is that this application site obviously is part of the railway land and part of Imperial Way, but it contributes to a wider sort of improvement, if you like, in front of the actual listed buildings themselves. So it's the whole that we're looking at in terms of the benefit and the way it knits together, therefore, and offsets and there's a sort of synergy, if you like, with that kind of wayfinding and the use of the main estate itself. Yeah. These are on here because some of these weren't in place at the time of the outline because, for example, the CO2 offset. And there's some monitoring in there which wasn't in the original as well. So these are kind of obligations that would be attached to this permission if we are looking to grant it. But there are two issues here that I wouldn't mind flagging up for you as well. The top one, those of you familiar with the actual main site, the main Olympia Master Plan site, will know that there's a cycle lane on Hammersmith Road that will be provided in due course, and there's some taxi sort of drop-off points that are linked to that work. In recognition of the fact that that is somewhere down the line, an uncertainty in terms of delivery at the moment, the developer in this case has agreed to provide some funding towards the council designing and installing temporary taxi drop-offs on Hammersmith Road, pending the more permanent arrangements that are approved as part of the master plan, which I think is a significant benefit. That obviously would benefit anybody coming to the site, people who are dropping off to use the station, people who are dropping off to use Olympia proper, or anybody else, or people who are coming into the facilities that were there, in due course. So I think that's a bonus. They've also agreed to contribute to the council's cost of the CPZ review on Zone C, which was excluded from the previous master plan agreement. We are doing it anyway, and this would obviously be some help in that respect. And there will be a consultation with residents that we'll undertake as part of our normal CPZ review process. And in fact, in respect of other work that remains outstanding under the original master plan site, which notably involves 2 reviews to be undertaken by us, financed by Olympia, into the current local access road situation. It was an attempt to try and future-proof the permission, which dates from some years ago, as you know, in acknowledgement of a long period of build-out. That's the traffic review reference there. So the 2 new elements there are the Zone C contribution and the taxi rank contribution. The other element, the second element, is new, but not new in the sense that we always do that now, but it wasn't at the time we weren't doing it. So that's an overview of the new elements that will go into the 106. Is that it? Oh, that's it apparently.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anything in the addendum that you'd like to alert us to?
Attention to the addendum. There's some small matters in there, mostly kind of some of the figures that were missing. So you'll see in there, it mentions the 5,000 construction works travel plan monitoring fee, and also the review of the commercial occupiers travel plans, and the carbon offset payment issue as well, which again wasn't around at the time that the original outline permission was granted. There are other elements as well, but I won't go into those at the moment unless you have questions about them. And this goes back to the fact that the main master plan and the outline permission were approved roughly at the same time. But of course, there was no guarantee at that point which was going to emerge and move forward. So where we are now, we know that the main master plan development is nearing completion and fit out. And as a consequence of that, that has triggered most of the substantial kind of cash payments and ongoing payments that were written into the section 106. These cover things like employment and training. Community benefits have been secured through through the school application, which is part of the main application site. The access to subsidised tickets for the theatre, etc., is under the original master plan as well. So a lot of that has fallen away, but there is technically, at the moment, still a chance that if the Olympia scheme gets approved, this Olympia Waste scheme, that they start on that, and that could be occupied before the first part of the main site. So as a consequence of that, we have to keep the reference to those clauses, even though we're 99% certain that what's going to trigger the remainder is going to be the completion and occupation of the main site because of where we're at in that process at the moment. So things like the affordable workspace provision, well, it was intended to put them in this development because of the delays with the station land. That doesn't look like it's going to happen before the office accommodation in the main site is occupied. And the current 106 requires that the affordable workspace is provided at that point. So there are some pressure points coming up, shall we say. But at the moment, we're trying to cover all the bases. In reality, it's likely that the main scheme will be finished and fitted out and occupied. And it's likely that this will be the scheme they build out on Olympia Way rather than the previous one that we approved, even though the outline application is still technically alive.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ian. Now we move on to speakers, and we have two registered speakers. We have Dominic Holmes from U Capital and Trevor Morris, who's the architect. You have 5 minutes between you, however you'd like to split that up. Whenever you're ready, if you'd like to come to the front. Oh, thank you. And as I say, it's the button on the right. And whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. My name is Trevor Morris, and I'm the architect for the Olympia Way scheme that you see in front of you this evening, and also the lead architect for the wider master plan, which is progressing well, as Ian said, is due for completion later this year. Firstly, I'd like to thank officers for their time and support over the last 12 months to bring this evening's application forward with a recommendation to approve. And isn't it refreshing and rare that a detailed planning application is coming forward which seeks a reduction in scale, height and floor space from a consented position secured by the outline permission which was first granted in 2020. The revised design thinking for Olympia Way has prioritised the visitor experience to the whole of reimagined Olympia, whilst the reduced scale of the pavilions provide an appropriate primacy to the Grade 2 and Grade 2 star listed exhibition halls. Recognising the more civic qualities of the proposed layout, visitors are encouraged to stop and dwell. The design of Olympia Way naturally divides into several character areas. The garden, which is located at the junction between Hammersmith Road and Olympia Way. This space will create an inviting place to meet and to gather. It will be generously planted and it will have a positive impact on the air quality and local biodiversity. The square, having passed through the garden, visitors will be welcomed by the first pavilion, which will have a carefully curated operator. Then the crescent. The crescent is a combination of pavilions and street trees. These create a moment. It's a moment to appreciate the length of Olympia Way and also the entrances into the exhibition hall. The crescent will guide movement towards the station building. Then we have the alcoves, and these are the spaces between the pavilions. These are welcomed reliefs along the length of the Olympia Way, and they will keep people moving freely in towards the exhibition halls and up towards the station. This also provides an opportunity for pop-ups and exhibition spaces to be located outside of the hall. This will be a well-curated experience which continues a tradition of the exhibition halls for the last 80 years or so. Then we have the overall avenue, and the avenue is a broad and uncluttered street which allows access to the venues. This will be used by pedestrians and cyclists with deliveries restricted to certain times of the day. Olympia Way has been redesigned to accommodate the anticipated footfall and the serving requirements of the exhibition and the wider uses being created as part of the wider master plan to give a clear and exciting and safe route for visitors and the local community. The 12-storey single pavilions, the 12 number pavilions and the 4-storey station building are designed to the highest architectural quality. Each building has a strong pattern diagonal motif that has taken influence from the windows of the Grand Hall. The pleated glazing of the Grade 2 star listed building is also reflected in the attractive screen, which visually protects and environmentally protects the pedestrians from the railway. We are excited by the heritage, by the ability for the scheme to finally have an appropriate street scene for the exhibition halls, to create a welcoming Olympia Way, and we encourage members to support the application in front of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat. Thank you. Okay, now that brings us to questions for officers, and who'd like to start with the questions? Yeah, Councillor Souslis, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions from me. Alan, in your presentation, you mentioned that the habitat, I think, will be maintained for 30 years. I'm not going to ask the obvious philosophical question of what happens after 30 years, but if you could just tell us exactly, if it's clear who will be maintaining that, the habitat. Even if you don't know, as long as we know that someone will be, and it's clear that there will be one and not, because what usually happens is that, you know, local authority looks at TfL and TfL looks at local authority and it's not been maintained.
Yeah,
then-
sorry, I didn't catch the first part. Are you asking who's responsible for the maintenance
For the maintenance of the habitat, it was in the presentation that it will be maintained by someone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a private road effectively, so it'll be part and parcel of the estate and will need to be, you know, maintained accordingly, because it's, as you heard the architect saying there, this is an important part of the entry to the estate, and indeed for pedestrians to get from the north to the south and vice versa. So it's all part and parcel of that kind of vision, if you like.
Okay, thank you for that. If I may ask another question, on the public toilets, which I also mentioned in the summary of the application, but we didn't have much detail. If you could just tell us a bit more on the public toilets and whether they will be accessible to anyone, if you know at this stage if there will be someone has to pay to access them, any information you might have. Sorry, microphone.
There are toilets in the station building, and there are toilets and cycle facilities close to the screen, I believe. Is that right? I don't have the details of accessibility, but we would expect them to be accessible. I mean, it rather dilutes the quality of the public realm if you're going to have to climb upstairs to get into a toilet, or if indeed if you're having to charge for them. But I don't have that level of detail. But we will certainly be looking to ensure that they are of a standard that is, you know, in keeping with the aspirations for the public realm.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the third, is this for us? No. Well, I guess the third question is a bigger issue, and it's one of the objections that residents have submitted, and it's around the accessibility of the station and the wider issue of increased footfall at the station. And also the question is twofold. One, if you have an update, if you have information on if anything is happening on making the station step-free and accessible, but also, I guess, on a second level, if this is something that we as a committee should be concerned about and something that should influence our decision-making with regards to this application.
I guess the straight answer is that this application needs to be considered on its own merits, and you know it's facing towards the aspirations for the estate generally. There is obviously an overlap in the sense that an entrance to the station from our side of the border would be down the estate, but in general terms, I mean that's a much more attractive way to get to the access than on the other side of the boundary. On a more general level, we are aware of the problems with Olympia Station, and we were aware of it when we lobbied for some improvements and ideally step-free access back in the pre-application on this. We were told at the time categorically that wasn't an option. There are still discussions ongoing, as I understand it, with the rail operator plus TfL to try and get some traction on some of these much-needed improvements. In fact, you know, we're very supportive of the residents in their desire to upgrade the station. You know, we don't see anything that you know that doesn't lead to that conclusion, but we can't actually do it as part of this. If circumstances change and something else comes forward of substance, then we can look at it there. But I think in the interim, it's more likely to be a result of residents and other including New Capital themselves. You know, I think they've been in discussions with the rail operator trying to improve the service there outside of the requirements of the planning permission. So yes, it's we're very much aware it's on the agenda, and it did gain some traction and then stopped during lockdown, and it looks like it's looking to start up again. And I think as long as that's pointed in the right direction, then, you know, who knows? For the purpose of this application, I don't think there's much more we can do on it. What was I going to say? Yeah, there are difficulties. I mean, this is a matter for TfL ultimately, but there are difficulties in making it step-free. It's a small station. You'd think it would be quite easy to do, but my understanding, and I've not heard this firsthand, is that it's something to do with the bridge. You'd have to effectively take the bridge down and rebuild it with a lift. So, you know, it's no surprise that given the number of larger stations, including White City, which is not far away, I don't think it's even on their radar at the moment. So not particularly helpful, but we are very kind of supportive of the residents' desires in this case.
Okay, no, that is helpful. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Melton.
Cognizant that this is a private road that has currently got 24-hour access to local residents using it to access the station and other amenities, and that the architects are going to such pains to make it a pleasant and beautiful place to be. Can you clarify a point on your presentation noting access would be restricted to between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.? Would this development, in fact, restrict some of the current access to the road? Sorry, to clarify, pedestrian access.
Yayan, your mic. Thank you.
Limber finger to that. No, not pedestrian. The whole intention is that it is to encourage pedestrian use. It's the vehicular movement that's restricted.
Fantastic. Apologies for misunderstanding.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Schwartz-Verdier.
Thank you, Chair. Cyclists as well? A restriction of movement for cyclists?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's only vehicles. So they're designed for cyclists and pedestrians, parts of it, pedestrians. It's the vehicles. So the split is between when you can service it outside of the core hours, and then when it's basically prioritising pedestrians the rest of the time.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask you a question about the daylight assessment. So in the report, all of this, the bulk of it is pages 68, 69. The sort of assessment starts by saying there would be a negligible impact by the development onto neighbouring properties. But then it's a very comprehensive report then. Thank you for that. That means that we kind of get an assessment of where the windows are now, many are below the guidance. That will change for some of them, but are there any windows that are currently above the BRE guidance or any other relevant guidelines for light that will be brought below the guidance as a result of that development?
Your mic, please.
The context of this is that this was part of the original application. You know, there was an environmental statement on the main master plan site, and obviously daylight and sunlighting, overshadowing, etc., were key issues across the piece. So much of this content here was included in the outline permission that was approved. There's a reason it's as detailed as it is here, because it needs to be understood in that wider context. The other positive is that, you know, it's sort of cards on the table. There's no attempt to sort of disguise it. So it is what it is, basically, in that sense. And the important thing with this type of analysis is to understand the sort of context. I mean, Matt mentioned before that we are obliged to look at each application on its merits in the context of all the relevant material considerations, as long as they're planning related. That includes things like, you know, residents' comments. It includes, obviously, elements of the technical assessment. But ultimately, it leads to a sort of a decision that's taken on balance, which is what we present to the committee. You know, more often than not, when we present these large schemes, we're trying to sort of voice a balance where we think that the public benefits, if you like, outweigh any individual harm, and this is an example of that. It's also important, and it's in the text here, so I won't go into it in detail. There's quite a lot of it. But the BRE guidelines are guidelines; they're not policy. And the policy advice on them is that you should treat them as such. So it's not actually saying that if you're in breach of the BRE guidelines, it's not acceptable. You're going to have to take a view, which is why we report in this detail to the committee about what the elements are. And as you rightly say, Councillor, where these have been identified, which is property by property, it drills down then into any sort of mitigating factors, like the fact that there may be bedrooms, southeast facing, etc. The fact that in some cases they're already very low, presumably because of architectural restraints on the building. And most of them relate to sunlight rather than daylight for that reason. So this is all part and parcel of trying to get a feel for how the impacts are, what any mitigation circumstances might be, and then weigh that up in the round against the obvious public benefits of the scheme. And that's what's been done here. I mean, it's very open about where there are breaches of the guidelines, but the conclusion is that seen in the round and seen against the benefits of the scheme, we feel is acceptable. Now, obviously, members may take a different view. That's the whole purpose of putting in the report. But we are comfortable that notwithstanding what we've identified in the report, there are other elements in this report, and indeed the conclusions on it in that section, which makes this scheme acceptable. It's been approved once, we're doing it again. It wouldn't make any difference, to be honest, in the assessment, but that, nevertheless, that is the case. So we put it forward on that basis that yes, we note that there will be non-compliance with elements of the BRE. Some of that is worse than others. Some of it is mitigated by other factors like winter sunlight, for example. And I think, that leads us then to conclude that seen in the round against our policies and the relevant sort of considerations, we feel this is still acceptable.
So in terms of quantification of the number of windows, quantifying the number of windows that will be brought down below guideline thresholds as a result of the development, do you have that number? Do you have an estimate?
Detailed in the report, it runs through them by individual property and identifies them. What we normally do in these circumstances, if somebody says to us, for example, there's X amount of loss here, our question then is, why? What's the current level? Are there any physical circumstances that mean that's lower than it ought to be? I mean, some of these are, of course, some of these are so low at the moment, you're taking them lower again. That's because of and mostly with the sunlight, because of the orientation of them. So we want to know which windows are they, what rooms are they, what's the reduction, are there any circumstances we need to be aware of to do that? And each of these tries to break it down in that way. So I can't really add much more to that's in the report. It is very detailed, but this is a sort of property by property indication of the impact. Which windows are effective, whether it's sunlight, winter sunlight, all around sunlight, or daylight, or any of those, and a conclusion about why we think that, despite that, this is acceptable. So I can't really, as I say, comment in any further detail on what's in there, but it is a pretty frank assessment of the daylight and sunlighting guidelines.
Thank you. Another question was around the digital screen. I'm not very much in favour of the spherisation of all of our outdoor spaces. The positive, however, in this presentation is that you've amended the provision of solar panels on top of the main development in order to kind of offset the increase in energy consumption. But the report still notes that the Olympia Energy Centre won't be able to provide all the energy the site needs. So this addition of a screen, is that completely or only partly offset by what you've negotiated with the applicant?
I haven't got the details on that, but I think, Alan, the solar panels have been maxed out, haven't they, on this one?
I'm not really sure. Can we just check that in the report, Matt? Just to see, so I can't access it.
87, 88.
Well, I guess what I'm doing on a general level, I mean, obviously our plan A is you max out what you can do physically on any site before you get to the sort of carbon offset payment situation. The carbon offset here is relatively low, which demonstrates this, you know, the energy saving is reasonable. So, and obviously we talked about a biodiversity net gain as well. My understanding was that we'd sort of maxed out the photovoltaic panels on this site, and that was, you know, effectively sufficient to offset it, because it's not been raised as an issue with me in terms of any energy matters. I don't have information about, you know, what it uses. I mean,
Sorry, yeah, and you just turned it off. Yeah, thanks.
we do think it's a worthwhile element, and it does help to give not just a sort of sense of place. You know, you can imagine people arranging to meet there, for example, given it's centrally located opposite the main stairs and exhibition centres. But it does allow for, you know, information as well as wayfinding information to be put on there, which again, I guess, acts as an attraction and potentially once people hanging around there a bit longer than they otherwise would do if they're just travelling straight through. So I'm not aware that there's anything on the energy side of it.
Do we have anything?
There was an energy statement that was submitted with it, and there would be another one at the practical completion side, so that we can assess the difference. And if the offset payment has been calculated in the back of the first one is fine, then there's no more. If it, for whatever reason, they've underperformed against that target, then there'll be a requirement for a top-up of the carbon offset.
Alan?
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, just apologies. I can't access the report whilst I'm screen sharing. So it's under page 87 under section 14.1.8 that covers off the fact that the development was amended to maximise the number of photovoltaic panels and further reduce carbon emissions generated by the station building. I'm not sure, again, it's not my area of expertise. I'm not sure whether that takes into account the screen itself. But I gather that the design of that would have been, you know, something that as part of the whole strategy will be designed to minimise energy use from the outset. But obviously the PV panels have been maximised elsewhere as a consequence of that.
Is energy strategy at some point when the thing is sort of up, substantially up at least, that will be the sort of thing that'll come through in that sort of revisited sort of energy statement, or strategy, so we can actually do a comparison of, you know, what we assumed at the beginning on the back of the one that was submitted to what we've actually got. Now the building is complete, on the basis that, you know, maybe not so much on Olympia Way, but on the more substantial elements, things can move on. So you can have a significant sort of improvement in the energy performance as technology happens if it's a long build-out program, for example. So.
Okay, thank you. Yep, Councillor Trey.
Thank you very much. And I would just like to commend this, you know, as the speaker, Trevor Morris said, it's very unusual to see the rollback of a bigger development, and the biodiversity gain over the previous application, the previous drawings, is phenomenal. There's the look of the site in comparison. It feels far more open, less overlooked. And in terms of energy use, I can only see that this would be a smaller energy footprint than that two-storey long building that we saw. So I would like to commend how lovely it looks, and I'm only suspicious that we are gaining such a lovely space. And but I do have a couple of things to note about it being a private road. Was about safety at night, safety on security of particularly for women and girls leaving the station and entering the station. I mean, already it's quite a dark and not inviting space. So to me, this only looks like an improvement on what it currently is. But I would like that to be taken into consideration in terms of lighting, because it is a route for people leaving work, or, you know, for safety. I just thought I'd bring that up. But everything you said about the pavilions, I mean, the other thing, just a point of note is that whether, as a private road, the pavilions would be encouraged or discouraged from having summer tables and chairs, and really using the space, and whether that is of material consequence or not, just in terms of noise. Apart from that, I mean, in a way, I think, because it looks like such a wonderful development, I don't think many people would be opposed to it becoming an urban space that people are using in summer. But I do appreciate there would be noise impact of that in the summer. So how that would be monitored in the actual usage of the space, if that's a question.
Would any officers like to come in on that, Yayan? Anything to...
I remembered. No, that's all perfectly logical. I mean, I think as things move forward, I can tell you that the Met Police secure by design officers already, as they do on most big schemes, have commented on it, raised the kind of issues that they look at, and there's a process that needs going through there. Obviously, there's licensing issues if you're going to have individual users there. But in my head, the incentive on managing it properly and keeping it spick and span rests with Olympia, because it's a main plank of their placemaking strategy, you know. So there's no reason for them to sort of drop their standards on this, or no reason to assume that they will. I mean, the details of it we'll need to sort of work through. Yeah, I mean, there may be some tweaks which come out of either the secure by design elements. I mean, that's all about making sure you've got clear sight lines. But as you rightly point out, it's an absolute, or before this, you know, it's, even I wouldn't walk down there after dark. And I'm less reluctant to sort of do that, shall we say. And at the back as well, you know, with the tail end of it down at northern end, you know, that will improve too. I mean, that part of the scheme then gives access to one of the hotels in the main site. So again, you'll have oversight there, and security. So all the ducks are in a line, at least, to make it work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, no further questions. In that case, we'll move on to voting. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, and that's on page 11. Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Tray.
For.
Councillor Souslis.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tiberi. For. I'll also be voting for. And recommendation 2, which is also on page 11, Councillor Chabot-Verdier.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Tray.
For.
Councillor Souslis.
For.
Councillor Pascu-Tiberi.
For.
I'll also be voting for. So that application has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we move on to items 5 and 6. Roy, I think you're going to present them as one. Is that right? Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Chair, thank
So
you.
whenever you're ready, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. When Alan's ready. Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the addendum. So on the first item, which is a variation application on the same site, the matrix, there's an informative that's been added and some other minor changes to the report. Also on the second application, which is for the full application, which relates to the additional floor and other extensions, there are some changes there in the report. We had a late letter which was received from a neighbour, and it doesn't really raise any new issues other than two aspects. One in relation to a glare report, and that matter is addressed in the actual officer's report in paragraph 6.38 to 6.39. I think the late letter basically doesn't agree with the conclusions in the report. And the second element is to do with the SIL estimates that's included in the report. Again, it's covered in the report, and it's just that the letter that's been received, the author doesn't agree with the conclusions. The only other thing, just to draw your attention, is I have a verbal addendum, which I should apologise for. That's to add and include an informative on the second application, which is the full application. That informative has been included on the first application, but I just noticed not on the first one. So in reference to that, that's an informative for contamination as per the variation on page 102, bullet point 1. That should also be referred to in the second application for the full application. Okay? Okay, thank you. So, as noted already, this presentation will involve two presentations for the same site. The first application relates to a variation of a 2023 permission, which is still extant, and essentially it's to vary some of the drawings to allow the following amendments which are cited. Essentially, the footprint of the ground floor is increased by 3 square meters. The first floor is decreased by 10 square meters. There are some changes to windows and roof lights and some materials and roof light design. That's essentially it. Thank you. The second application is for all of what I've just described, plus an additional floor above the main roof, which sits in the center of the site, away from the boundaries. Thank you, Alan. So this is the application site. On the left-hand side, you can see the site in red. It's a backland site surrounded by residential properties to the north, south, and to the west. To the northeast, you've got a school site and a playground. The number 60 Clancarty Road forms part of the school site, a former caretaker site, and by virtue of the fact that it's in the site, it's actually part of the listing for the site, which is highlighted on the right hand side. So the sort of salmon color is the extent of the listing, and then you can see either side of this application site. To the north, you've got the Studford Street conservation area, and the site itself sits in the Hurlingham conservation area, and then, as I mentioned already, the building of merit is adjacent next door. And just for clarity, the site itself is a studio business use. It's got about 3,500 square meters of floor space there with creative industries, and the principal use on the site is as a recording studio with other digital bits and pieces. Thank you, Alan. This is just an aerial shot to show you where the site in context. This is looking north, so to the south of the buildings, which are the grey roof. You've got properties fronting Peterborough Road. And the access to the site is along Peterborough Road. And to the north, you can see in the playground in the sort of background. The images on the right just give you a flavour of what's on Peterborough Road. The top image just shows the access between the terraces. And then you can see the entrance, vehicular entrance to the site, the main entrance to the site on the bottom image. Thank you, Alan. Again, this is just giving you an overview from the other perspective. So this is from the school end, if you like. You can see the playground and you can see the rear elevation. And then you look north, you can see Peterborough Road. And the listed building you can see on the image on the top right. And then on the bottom right, you've got the building with the cream sort of elevation, which is the end terrace. That is the actual part of the listed siting as well. Thank you, Alan. So this is just an overview for the two proposals. So essentially what I've said already, the first application is to do with the variation, which is effectively a variation of a permission that was granted back in 2023. There were ground floor and first floor extensions that were approved. The second application is for all of that plus an additional floor at roof level. And that image in the bottom shows the approved extensions, the location of them towards the front of the building, and the additional floor at roof level. Okay, thank you, Alan. So this is, if you like, the starting point. So the two red lines highlight the location of where the additional accommodation was provided via the 2023 application. So you've got an extension mansard on that front, which is at first floor, and then on the side, you've got an infill area, which was previously used as a sort of, or still used as a car park, but would be infilled by this proposed development. And you can see that if you're looking at the elevation, which is on the bottom of this image, you can see from left to right, you've got a single story element, then you've got a sort of a glazed 1.5 story height, and beyond that is an existing element that doesn't change other than the elevation. And then you've got to the right above where the green area is, that's the first floor extension, which is in a mansard form. Thank you, Alan. So that was the current position, and you can see on the left-hand side that is the same thing, essentially, the mansard roof at first floor level, which is highlighted in those red lines around. And on the left-hand side, you can see what we call an infill, and that infill shows the 1.5 story extension on the side, and then where it drops down on the boundary to about 2.7 meters high. But the significant thing in the change, if you like, between what's been approved and what's being sought here is that on the right hand side shows what's being sought now as a variation to the previous approval, and you can see the ground floor elements in that infill area has reduced in height, so effectively by about 1/2 story it's dropped down in height. So if for all intents and purposes, it improves the aspects for those properties that are in Studridge Streets. So you can just about see some of them there at 145 and 147. And that is an improvement in terms of sense of openness. Also, the first floor element, which is that long elongated part, which is at the rear of number 91 to 101 Peterborough Road, that element has been reduced in height by about 1 meter and also set back. So overall, the massing, if you like, of the development has been reduced. Thank you, Alan. So this is just showing you the footprint of all of what I've just described effectively. So on the bottom right, this is effectively the increase in 3 square meters of that ground floor element. And then you've got the yellow area, which is the first floor element. And you can see the area that's highlighted in red around that yellow area, that's the reduced footprint at first floor. So previously it would have gone to the edge of that building, but it's been reduced, and that reduction results in a reduction of 10 square meters. Thank you, Alan. So this is just highlighting the difference, if you like, between what's been approved and what's we're looking at now. So the yellow line is what was previously approved, the consented scheme. And then the building if you like, below that, particularly on the left-hand side, where you see the matrix sign, you can see the left-hand side, that left and most sides, you can it's 2.7 meters in height, and it falls below that yellow line. So there's a reduction in height along that boundary with Studridge Street. And similarly, when you look at that elevation, the main long roof, that's the rear of the properties in Peterborough Road, there's been a reduction in height. And that's reflected again when you look at, if you were looking at the properties that are either side, if you like, at the front of the site, you've got Studridge Street and you've got Clancarty Road. So the top image, you can see again, the yellow is the outline of what was previously approved when viewed from the properties in Clancarty Road. You can see the proposed bit is within the yellow element. Similarly, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the yellow highlights the location of what was previously approved, and then within that, you can see the mansard, which has been reduced in height. Just out of shot is the, below that is the top of the single-story roof. Thank you, Alan. There are some changes to some windows. So basically on the left-hand side, you've got the roof light, which is as approved, and you've got several roof lights and expansions of roof light. And then on the right-hand side, the sort of slightly different image, you've got some planting, and you've also got some much reduced roof lights. So on the left corner, the image on the right-hand side of the left-hand corner, you can see some light blue images. Those are roof lights, as are the ones that are just along the frontage in front of that landscape roof. They're all roof lights. So it's basically a reduction. And the reason why I mention this is because it's something that was raised in the objections that were raised. And also, just on the left-hand side, you can see that elevation would be adjacent to Studridge Street. There was a window there, a roof light that's been removed. And you can see on the image on the right-hand side, it's gone. Thank you, Alan. So this is what you end up with. So you see an elevation there to the rear of Peterborough Road. You can see the single-story element, and then there's a mansard roof above that larger block, if you like. And you can see the image on the bottom, which is illustrative, again, just to highlight the location and the lowering of that element on the boundary. It doesn't rise above the boundary. And then the mansard roof is on the right-hand side. Okay, thank you, Alan. So essentially, we had quite a few objections to this, hence the reason why it's been brought to committee. Some of the key concerns that these are highlighted in the report. There's several of them which are duplicated in both applications. And for the avoidance of doubt, I think there may have been some confusion for some of the residents because they've objected to elements on this scheme which are actually covered by the other scheme. But in either case, we've included all the objections that were made in relation to this application for this application, and even though the duplicate on the other one, we've considered it on both. The key issues on this one are highlighted here. That there was concerns about the use of this building as a music recording studio, creative hub. It's a long-established use, and as set out in the report, these are just extensions, and these extensions have been established by a previous 2023 permission. And these are minor changes to the consented scheme, so there's no real significant change. Similarly, the design, scale, bulk, etc., all of that is kind of addressed in the report, but we consider these to be modest changes which don't really affect the character and appearance of the consented scheme. Neither do we think it has any harm on the conservation area, and notably these small changes don't really have any impact on neighbours in terms of outlook, daylight, privacy, noise and light pollution. We think the revisions are neighbourly, and in fact the reduction in height actually improves the situation for residents, so that's welcomed. Thank you, Alan. So this is just trying to sort of highlight some of the changes. I think I don't want to go through it too much, but there's an image on the bottom where you can see the rear elevation of, or I should say the front elevation of the building, but it's to the rear of Peterborough Road. And what you can see there are the 45-degree lines, which you often quoted in the officer reports, which talk about outlook and impact on neighbouring properties as guidance. And you can see that the extension on the left-hand side falls well within that. The proposed roof falls well within that. So in terms of outlook, it's acceptable. There's no impact in terms of daylight and sunlight. There's no issues with privacy, no issues with noise, light pollution or highways. So from an officer perspective, this is something that we would support. Thank you very much. And there's a summary there. Essentially, it represents modest alterations to a scheme that's already been consented. The design bulk has no real impact on the character of the conservation or the listed building. The proposed changes are subservient to the existing design, and there's no significant impact on neighbours, and there are no higher objections. So officers are recommending approval subject to conditions. Okay, so straight to the next one. So this is application 2, which is essentially what I've just described plus an additional floor. So if you see on the top image on the left-hand side, you can see, I can't see from those that think they're numbered, but effectively the front elevation of the building, which is at the rear of the properties in Peterborough Road. There's I think a black roof just on the left corner, southwest corner. Yeah, thank you, Alan. Yeah, that's a single-story element. And then to the right of that is that mansarded roof at first floor. Alan, you just point that out. Yeah, so those two elements are the elements from the previous scheme which don't change, are included in this application. The bit that changes is this sort of T-shape at roof level, that grey roof. And you can see that's the elevation looking south. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the elevation looking north, which is the rear of the site, effectively adjacent to the playground. And you can see on the left-hand, top right image, there are some roof lights. There's some green roofs softening the appearance of that. But the key thing I would say is that the boundary, the walls are retained as existing. There's no dropping in heights. They're retained as existing. And then the bottom images, which is slightly out of shot, but they are the elevations which reflect those views above. Don't know if you can prove any of those, Alan. Are they? quite. No. Maybe, anyway, that'll be. Okay, thank you very much. And then these are just floor plans. So you've got the ground floor plan, the area highlighted in blue, aqua blue, that's the extension at ground floor. The first floor, that's the area highlighted in red and yellow, that's where that mansard is. And then you've got the new second floor on the left bottom corner. So all of that is new and it's set in from the boundaries, centrally located with all the various green roofs. On the north side of that, you've got a terrace area, which is more of an access area to provide, situation of siting of plant. So it's set within the roof, and you'll see it on another image, but effectively it's not a terrace, so there will be a condition attached to prevent it being used as any sort of roof terrace as such. And there's also conditions to make sure that any flat areas of the roofs are not used as roof terraces. And then you've got on the right-hand side, the bottom corner, that's the roof in its kind of entirety, if you like, with that sort of what I call a T shape. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, this is just again highlighting where the first floor. I'm not sure that needs to be in there. Actually, we can move on. So these are some street views. So you've got on the top left, that's an existing view. Again, I can't quite see. There's a small map on the right-hand side which showed you where these images are taken from, but essentially there's a gap between the properties on the sort of southeast corner where you can see the existing building, the existing roof line, and then you've got on the right-hand side that equivalent view, which basically shows the sort of design so that it's sloping away from the boundaries and subservient to the sort of parent building. So there's an acknowledgement there's an increase in height, but because it's centrally located, it doesn't actually interrupt the outlook for the neighbouring properties or indeed some of the views, which Alan may come to. And in the bottom left corner, you can see that building in the sort of foreground is number 60 Clancarty Road. That's within the school, former schoolkeeper's site. That's view is across the playground. So then what you see here is obviously the same view, obviously with trees in leaf. So you don't see the building as much, but essentially it would be in that sort of location that's hidden by the trees. Okay, thank you, Alan. So in terms of consultation, one of the things that came out in consultation was that there was some disgruntlement amongst some of the residents saying that there wasn't sufficient engagement with them as part of this process. Just for the clarity, the report makes this clear. There was an application submitted in February, I believe, or withdrawn in February for a similar proposal for an additional floor at roof level, and that application was withdrawn by the applicant following a negative response from residents, and officers gave feedback on that, and they were responsive to that and decided to reflect on the design to try and make it more sympathetic. So having gone away, they then revised their proposals and then carried out their own pre-application consultation with the residents over a sort of a 3-month period through various events and notifications, and they use the feedback to frame the proposals that you see before you this evening. So again, some of those objections there cited are just for information, but it's all covered in the report. Thank you, Alan. So highlighting again this issue of outlook, you can see that the blue lines show the 45 degrees, and that's taken from the front elevation, as in just behind Peterborough Road, and then the one at the bottom is taken from the school view playground, effectively. And you can see substantially the building is within the 45-degree lines. There is a slight breach in one part, but I'll come to that in a moment. But essentially, if there is a slight breach, then on-site judgment becomes the main determining factor. And in this case, we think that the breach is so minor that it's not significant to harm outlook. Thank you, Alan. This is just a view from so if you look on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see there's some terraces, which are the properties in Studridge Street. And when they look out of their windows, those nearest properties, they'll see this view. And there are some terraces which are, well, actually not terraces, I take that back. There are some windows, which you can see at first floor level, which are set behind some screens, but significantly those windows are more than 18 meters away and they are set behind screens, so there would be no undue harm to in terms of properties opposite. And similarly, because they're more than 18 meters away, there's no harm to those properties that would be in Studridge Street. Then you've got to the right-hand side of where that 45-degree line is, you can see there is a small infringement when you draw the 45-degree line, just the tip of that roof. So yes, it's acknowledged that there is some infringement, but we think it's fairly modest. And significantly, there are no windows in that elevation facing the properties on the right-hand side to Peterborough Road. So there's no harm in terms of privacy. Next slide, please, Alan. Again, the reason for showing this is simply because there's that roof terrace area I mentioned on the north side of the roof, which is an access area. So the other side, Alan, sorry. That slip at the top, at the very top, near the top, that green wedge, that's it. So that is a terrace area, but it's not going to be a usable terrace area, so except for maintenance, and it's more than 80 meters away from the properties in Clancarty. Okay, next slide. So in summary, we think this proposal is a positive one. It enhances the employment space on site. There would be affordable workspace provided, offers employment skills training for apprenticeships, and they've signed up to our upstream initiative as a council. That's secured by Section 106. Their design, we think, is recessive and subservient. There's no impact on conservation area or the listed building. And the green roof softens that. The appearance of the building. Oops, just a little bit back, Alan, sorry. Just want to highlight, thank you, sorry, almost done. 35% reduction in CO2 footprint, which is welcome because of the solar panels, the green roofs, the insulation with modern materials, and also there's some electric vehicle charging introduced. And I don't want to go through neighbourhood impacts, but cover that. The highways have considered the proposals. There's no objection from them. They welcome the reduction in parking spaces. There are, electric vehicular charging spaces being provided. There's a maximum of 2 business permits, and also cycle parking and travel plan are being provided, secured by condition. The reason why I say all this is because these are some of the things that came up in the consultation that was carried out. These were concerns that were raised. On environmental matters, the flood risk, which is out of sight there, and the air quality, colleagues had no objections, so they welcome the proposals. And then we have the heads of terms. So heads of terms, I've mentioned already, the affordable workspace. There's also a financial contribution of £30,000, which, although this is not a major scheme, we've managed to negotiate this, and the applicants have been very supportive, and trying to sort of encourage, apprenticeships and supporting local skilling of the workforce, and have signed up to our upstream pathway bond, which is basically a broad menu of opportunities to help businesses play a role in supporting our local community. So all of this is quite welcome for a scheme of this size. Thank you very much. Alan, so the next one, yep, so we're basically recommending approval on this application subject to a legal agreement as well as the conditions, etc. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Roy, thank you very much. We have a speaker registered, Duncan Thompson, who's the applicant. Since Roy took them as 2, I'll join your time together. So you have 6 minutes in total, and just press the button on the right when you're ready. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Chair, councillors. My name is Duncan Thompson, and I'm the applicant and one of the directors of Matrix Studio Business. Matrix Studios was founded in 1977 by Nigel Frieda in a basement of his West End home. There, he recorded some tracks from an unknown band, which soon became a global phenomenon known as The Police. During the next few decades, Matrix was a key contributor to the explosive UK music scene, recording tracks from bands such as Oasis, Blur, Coldplay, and Sugar Babes. In the year 2000, Nigel moved Matrix to 91 Peterborough Road, building 13 Abbey Road specification studios, and for the first time, introducing office space for the creative industries. Today, Matrix and our tenants have been involved in numerous #1s, hundreds of gold records, and thousands of top 10 hits. We have 50 tenants, with 70% still linked to the music industry, involved in recording, management, producing, merchandising, podcasting, live events, and licensing. The other 30% are in other industries such as digital marketing, book publishing, films, app development, and even some physiotherapy and personal training. In order to adapt to our tenants' growing needs, the previous approved application provided a 1.5-story ground floor extension and a single-story first floor extension. This allowed for improvements in the ground floor layout by combining the cafe reception areas and our waiting areas together, while also allowing existing tenants to increase their space at first floor level. Following the detailed design process for our additional floor, which I'll discuss next, changes were required to make these two extensions fit with the wider design. Therefore, following an extensive consultation and thorough planning process, we're in support of the officer's recommendation for approval, which concluded that the proposed amendments would not alter the conclusions reached in the assessment and subsequent granting of the extant parent permission. The site would continue to function and operate as an employment site and therefore beneficial to the local economy, and there would be no additional harm to any nearby heritage assets and to any neighbouring amenities as a result of this application. Moving on to the next part, as I did it in two separate parts, Matrix Studios over the last decade has averaged a 96% occupancy level, which is a testament to the creative community we have developed together with our tenants. Of this, 70% of our business owners are LBHF residents. Due to the success and growth of our larger tenants, we have struggled to provide space they need to expand without letting some of our smaller tenants go. This goes against our ethos of encouraging ideas, supporting growth, and delivering a creative environment which allows our community and businesses to thrive. Therefore, due to the strong demand in LBHF for space for existing and new local businesses in the creative industries, we set out our vision back in 2023, which was to generate sufficient new economically viable floor space, to ensure that any new development has no material impact on the amenity of neighbouring dwellings and the setting of the adjacent listed building, and to improve the building energy and sustainability performance and deliver an EPC level of A by 2030. The design rationale for our proposals took design cues from the nearby Sands End Arts and Community Centre, which won multiple architectural awards. Following a sequence of design revisions to establish build parameters and the volumes within which new development could be set without negative effect, this was then overlaid with the new architectural design and materials in order to deliver a building which not only is architectural merit, but also enhances the sustainability and the conservation area. Through close working with Hunkers Architects, a local award-winning LBHF architect, we have been able to design a proposal which greatly improves the aesthetics and appearance of the building, creates the necessary space required by existing tenants, and provides new affordable accommodation for emergent businesses without the detriment to surrounding heritage assets or our neighbouring amenities. Matrix Studios has been part of the Parsons Green and LBHF community for the past 20+ years, and we take our position very seriously. Therefore, following an extensive public consultation and thorough planning process, we're in support of the officer's recommendation for approval, which in summary says, the scheme is considered to be of high quality design, which optimizes the capacity of previously developed land and respects the setting, significance, and value of nearby heritage assets. It is considered having regard to the development plan as a whole and all other material considerations, the planning permission should be granted subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Therefore, I would ask councillors to vote with their officer's recommendation to approve this and the previous application. Thank you, Chair and councillors, for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you. If you'd just like to turn the mic off before we go. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to questions for officers. And would anyone like to start the question? Yeah, Councillor Chaffot earlier.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, can I highlight, first of all, the quality of the report as well as the presentation? It's really excellent, as well as the representation made by the person in support. I thought they were very good and highlighting the real voting confidence in the locality from the creative arts industry. So I'm thankful to everyone for putting such an important report together. This is the perfect marriage of something that I'm very passionate about, which is decarbonisation. So I'm thankful to all officers for having worked really hard on implementing measures. You've said it, 35% reduction, pages. Where are the conditions? 128 to 132, lots about green roofs, solar panels, zero emission heating. Could you just clarify, are these conditions only going to happen with the bigger development, or are they also possible with this, just a smaller proposal?
So normally with major schemes, there's a requirement because of the scale, the trigger to automatically try and comply with climate change objectives. But within the local plan, within the SPD, there are aspirations which are to encourage. So that's what this has achieved through officers negotiating, and the applicant willing to sort of see the value of that. And so hence on this scheme, albeit less than the threshold, it's welcomed and it's secured. So yeah.
And it's secured for both scenarios.
It's secured for the larger scheme. For the smaller scheme, that's already been established, if you like, by the parent permission. So this would only be a variation in terms of the revisions that were being proposed to the extent permission. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And then from the residents, there was a suggestion that obviously creative industries and music, there could be noise. So could you tell us more about this extension, how it is going to be built to enable the performance and recording of music without disturbing neighbours?
Well, first and foremost, they do record there anyway at the moment. That's a long established use. The only thing that's different is the additional floor space. So given the spec of the accommodation at ground floor and first floor, one would expect the same. But having said all that, we would have, where are we? Make sure it's there. We would have additional condition 20. Just there's no music or amplified voices emitted from the additional floor should be audible to neighbouring properties. So that would mean a requirement to actually install sufficient insulation in terms of noise and sound. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor Sislis?
Just very quickly, and mainly because we have some objections or comments that you didn't have the address, and I can see that one of the comments was about the safety of students at the school. If the question is if you've had any comments that you're aware of or engagement from the school itself, or if it's just others that bring up that issue.
I think it's others that brought that issue, because essentially I think what's being said is that there's a school next door, and if you have a site next door and they need to access the site, because the narrow access through the entrance on Peterborough Road might mean they need to have some alternative access, that would be an arrangement between the school and the applicant. But no such arrangement is in place at present. However, there would be a construction logistics plan, construction management plan in play. So that would be an opportunity if that did arise for an agreement to be reached between the parties, but they'd have to be agreement between the parties involved. But at this stage, that's not apparent.
Okay. Councillor Vasquez-Vera.
Very much. A quick one from me on PV glare. It says, I think in 6.39, that any potential glare is only visible for a very short period of time. What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in these matters, you can imagine, but essentially, an expert has carried out an assessment, and the way that the solar panels are angled, most of the light would be obviously directed upwards. The materials for the solar panels would be absorbing light. So I think what's being suggested here is that there would be very limited reflection to the properties opposite. So that's an important point, albeit there might be some momentarily, but it wouldn't be, over a sustained period. So, yeah.
So talking minutes or even less?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the figures, but yeah.
Very much.
Okay, any further questions? No? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to, first we'll vote on item 5 and recommendation 1, which is on page 99. Councillor Chavot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Tray.
4.
Councillor Souslis.
4.
Councillor Basket-Tiberi.
4.
I'll also be voting 4. And now moving to recommendation 2, which is also on page 99. Councillor Chavot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Tray.
4.
Councillor Souslis.
4.
Councillor Basket-Tiberi.
4.
I'll also be voting 4. So item 5 has been approved. And now moving on to item 6, recommendation 1, which is on page 125. Councillor Chavot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Tray.
4.
Councillor Souslis.
4.
Councillor Basket-Tiberi.
4.
I'll also be voting 4. And recommendation 2 on page 125. Councillor Chavot-Verdier.
4.
Councillor Melton.
4.
Councillor Tray.
4.
Councillor Souslis.
4.
Councillor Basket-Tiberi.
4.
I'll also be voting 4. So items 5 and 6 have been approved. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Thank you. Now we move finally to item 11. And Alan, whenever you're ready, please introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is confirmation of a tree preservation order for a number of trees at Miller's Court, which is situated in the Mile Conservation Area. So the 5 trees that this relates to can be seen on the plan here. The reason we made a provisional TPO is because we received notification from the owners of the property of their expressed need to remove 8 trees across the site. Officers reviewed the trees both in terms of their amenity value and condition, and found that 5 of the trees would warrant retention, and therefore the making of a provisional TPO. In response to that provisional TPO, we've received a number of letters of support, which total 9, and then 2 objections, primarily from the Tenant Management Association of Miller's Court. One of the key things within the representations that are made relates to the kind of the future intention to bring forward replacement tree planting. At this stage, we don't have any facility, both through the notification or through the TPO process, to insist or manage the replacement trees being brought forward, unless that was part of future management of a confirmed TPO. So in that regard, whilst we understand the intention, in order to give the council more future management over and an insistence on replacement trees being brought forward, the recommendation is to ensure that we confirm the TPO and then deal with any future felling of trees or management of those trees subject to the TPO through a subsequent application. So these are the 5 trees, and again, there's just a couple of photographs just to show those in situ in terms of their considered amenity value. Obviously, these were taken quite recently, so don't show the trees in their best light, but they do show, obviously, the impact of the trees from some of the public viewpoints and within the courtyards of the space as well. So, yeah, the recommendation is to confirm the TPO for the 5 trees as originally made through the provisional order.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. We have one speaker, Marianne Denny. Marianne, whenever you're ready, you have 3 minutes, and it's the button on the right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mariana Denny, and I'm a resident of Miller's Court, which is a development of houses around a courtyard in a conservation area. I'm speaking in support of the tree preservation order for the trees in the courtyard in Miller's Court on behalf of a group of supporting residents. There are 8 mature trees in the courtyard at the moment, and these trees are vital to our well-being. They create a green environment, give us shade in hot summers, filter the fumes of the nearby A4, and they're a vital habitat for wildlife. They're all different sizes, ages, and varieties, which makes for an interesting and attractive environment. The trees all flower at different times of the year, so there's always something to enjoy. The trees covered by the TPO are not diseased, they have a long life ahead of them. We have a detailed report from a professional tree specialist which confirms this. All they need is pruning and some TLC. Unfortunately, they have not been looked after very well in recent years. There is no reason to cut down the trees because of the condition of the brick planters in which they grow, because these can be repaired. We have gone into this in detail and have estimates for repairs to the planters and have presented these to the directors. The 3 different bricklayers we consulted saw absolutely no problem in repairing the planters with the trees in place and assured us they would be as good as new. There is only one planter that has cracked as a result of the roots of the tree, and this can also be repaired and the growth of the tree controlled by pruning. Damage to other planters is from careless delivery drivers and lack of maintenance over the years. Since the planters don't need to be demolished, nor do the trees. Ideally, we would like the council to put TPOs on all the healthy mature trees in the courtyard, but I understand that you are only able to do that for trees that are visible from the public roads, even though the courtyard is used by lots of people on their daily walks. It's a shame that it has had to come to this, despite us sitting down with the directors and showing them our carefully drawn up and budgeted plans. In summary, we request that the councillors vote in favour of confirming this tree preservation order as recommended by the council's officers in order to protect the amenity value provided by the trees, the character and appearance of the conservation area, and the quality of the environment within the local area. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for your time. If you wouldn't mind turning the mic off. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for officers? No, no questions for officers. Okay, in that case, we'll move straight on to voting. The one and only recommendation, which is on page 263. Councillor Chavot-Verdier?
4.
Councillor Melton?
4.
Councillor Tray?
4.
Councillor Souslous?
4.
Councillor Pascu-Tabure?
4.
And I'll also be voting for, so that has been approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for attending or watching tonight's meeting. The draft minutes will be published on the website shortly and will be approved at the next meeting, which is on the 4th of March, 2025. And if you have any queries or questions in the meantime, please contact the case